Hello, everybody, and welcome to the January 31st, 2023 iteration of the Kubernetes SIG-Windows community meeting. As always, these meetings are recorded and uploaded to YouTube, so be sure to adhere to the CNCF Code of Conduct. For anybody who's new here, that mostly just boils down to be nice to everybody. Let's take a look at the agenda today. It's the wrong date, off by one. Okay, announcements are, I think the big announcement still is that enhancements freeze is coming next Thursday. I think there were two enhancements that we were maybe tracking for SIG-Windows. One is the node service log viewer, one with Aravind, which I think we'll probably end up discussing a little bit more today. And then there was another one for potentially the setting the size of that root storage space for the Windows containers. I haven't had a chance to focus on or to write up. I think I have like half of that kept written up, but I haven't had a chance to do that. So that one may slip. If there's somebody who wants to help pick that up, let me know. If not, I'll try and have that kept done this release so that they can get reviews early next release and go in. But I think that one was mostly we have the workaround is to use empty dirs, but it would just be nice to have for consistency. Does anybody else have any other announcements or anything, any other updates that I might have missed? Nope. All right. So next, we'll give some space if there's any new contributors on the call who want to say hi. I see at least one familiar face who hasn't been here for a while, or familiar name, but feel free to unmute yourself, say hi if you'd like. Oh, all right, going in, let's start with the agenda item. The first agenda item is any updates on the Windows Container Unconference. I think our event asked that. I spoke with Brendan Smith. We spoke with him yesterday, and he is actually interested in putting something like that together. He messaged me this morning saying that he had a fever and a sore throat, wouldn't be able to be here, but he is going to start looking at that some more. If anybody is interested, I think later, like after this meeting, let me start a thread in SIG-Windows Slack to see if we can gauge some interest. And I'll also put I did find a link with like an agenda from the previous unconference, if anybody is interested in what that is. So we can continue that discussion and do an interest check on Slack with that.
I assume this is the conference at KubeCon?
I don't know what Brendan was thinking exactly. In the past, this was hosted in Redmond. There's on the Microsoft campus, there's like a little space for having conferences like that, and people were invited, but it very well could be that like timed and coordinated with one of the upcoming KubeCons. I will defer to Brendan.
I like the idea of outside of KubeCon. I feel like KubeCon is too busy already.
Yeah.
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 If folks wanted to do it on the East Coast, we could do it over here too, if there's issues having in Redmond, but I could probably justify making it out.
Will it also have some sort of online sharing or something, so other people can join as well?
I don't know. We'll have to talk to Brendan about it.
They're not allowed to use Zoom at Microsoft, Claudio.
Possibly Teams. I don't know. I don't know. We're on Zoom right now, Jay.
We'll have someone live stream the unconference on Zoom.
Yeah.
StreamYard.
I think we should stop piling on Mark and wait for Brandon to show up at a follow-up meeting and ask all these questions.
Yeah. So I'll start a thread in Slack after this, and then we can get some more. You can ask all of these questions for Brendan. I guess Arvind, since you're here and unmuted. Did you want to, is the plan still to go to SIG-Node today to discuss that? I'm able to attend the full SIG-Node meeting, so I will also be there, and then we'll.
Yeah, I spoke to Murnal, Ryan Phillips, Derek, all about that. I put this on the agenda. We're going to show up. And yeah, the general consensus is if SIG-Node is also open to accepting the patch with it disabled by default behind an option, we should move forward. And, you know, I was thinking more about, you know, Jordan's pushback. It almost seems like it basically boils down to whether cluster admin implies node admin. And it almost feels like where Jordan is coming from, that's not equal. And so, you know, that's what we need to resolve. And then, of course, there's this thing of convenience, right? You can always figure a way around getting those logs. So we'll talk today and see how it goes.
Was there a sense of if one was a superset of the other one, or were they similar but kind of disjoint sets of permissions?
Yeah, it's like, I think it depends upon who you talk to. I think for some people, it's the same. For other people, like the node admin is someone else and the cluster admin is someone else. So it varies.
I see.
I think the key bit that comes from our side, from the Windows side, is that all of this stuff using a static pod or a host process container is not going to work for us because, hey, that means the kubelet is up and running and CNI is working and pods are coming up. Our debugging issue is pods are not coming up, kubelet is ready, what's going on? And we usually need to look at kubelet logs, maybe the containerd logs to figure out what's going on. And that's our use case. So that's the way I'm going to sort of put it forward.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that was a discussion that we had at the very inception of this and the cap, right? So the fact that, yeah, I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah, nothing else for me.
Okay, cool. Let me. Okay, I can give a couple of updates on what we've been doing with the Windows Service Proxy. So for anybody who's not kind of aware, the Windows Service Proxy is a new repository that Jay helped set up that's going to eventually be the new home for an out-of-tree Windows Q proxy that's based on KPNG. One of the big updates that we have now is we actually have an image that's getting built and published to the Kate's staging prod for that has the Windows KPNG binary to be used. I'll put a link in. I don't think that there's a link in the GitHub repository yet, but these are all coming through the post-submit jobs against masters. That's kind of a big step forward for allowing us to set up more CI and validation for this.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, no problem. And there's been I don't have a cluster set up right now, but I do have a pull request. Did that merge? Okay, looks like that merged. I had a pull request open that has some deployment files that to get this running in a CapZ cluster. Right now, there's still a little bit of things we need to figure out. That there's an issue that's discussed. One is, I think James put together a proposal a while ago about what we would need to do to have it so that there was less reliance on some CNI specific behaviors, specifically like what the network name is, and because right now each CNI creates a new HNS network with like a unique name, and it would be good to standardize that, and also things like if there's that source VIP and a special endpoint that's needed for that, or the port, how do we find what that source value is from the endpoint, kind of standardizing on all of that. There's
Do you
an
think
issue in
we should,
here.
do you think we should just in general, SIG-Windows, just have like have a standard that we say CNIs should name the HNS endpoint blah, and that's like, is that what you're suggesting?
That's
Yep. That's exactly what James was suggesting here as one of the proposed solutions. And then there was a couple of, there's some comments about like, we could potentially like have it default to looking for that, but take in an environment variable that if it does need to get overridden. So yeah, just so those were some of the exact, you know, proposals here.
And this is going to make it so that the kube proxy doesn't need to, has a reasonable default for the HNS.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
No,
today
yeah.
at least what I had to do for the Calico deployment is do a couple, like we wait for, I think we probably don't need to wait for the networks now, the HNS network to come up, but we need to query some state to get the IP address that's associated with the endpoint that Calico set up. So we have to do that in a PowerShell script, and then before we can start KPNG and pass these environment variables in. And we could potentially generalize a PowerShell script that's put in there, but since we have KPNG
Yeah.
itself right there, I think it makes sense to just put all that information right into the KPNG itself.
Okay,
James,
I see.
Yeah.
Go ahead, James.
I think my goal is to have this so that it's just a binary, so we don't have to have some PowerShell. And the main reason for that is if we have to have PowerShell, then we also have to have that PowerShell signed. And so it just makes it a whole nother step to our whole build process. And there's no real reason to have the PowerShell script for kube-proxy because we should be able to set all those settings as, you know, parameters or it's sane default kind of things.
Yeah, okay.
And have some kind of well-known values, and if we need to override them, like potentially cluster site or pass that in through the environment or through environment variables.
Cool. So my update is I'm working with Damon on getting him ramped up so he can sort of help us out with this repo. And I've been pairing with him and he's pretty much up to speed on things. I'm expecting him to be able to start doing stuff within a week or two. So Mark, if you have, it looks like you've got 8 issues. If you have other issues you want people to look at, let me know. And then hopefully I can start testing it again after that phase is over. He's still ramping up on how to do stuff with privileged pods and our host process containers and stuff, but he knows KPNG inside out. So it's just a matter of once he knows Windows, he'll be able to do all this stuff.
Okay, yeah, and I can definitely help out with those process stuff. I think the next steps for me, which I hope to have done soon, is to get a periodic job set up that's running all of the or probably like a subset of the networking tests in the CAPZ clusters that we have that are using KPNG, so that we can have just like an A/B comparison between the entry queue proxy and the and KPNG. I did notice, and I'll like in order to get the load balancer programming working in CAPZ, there were some things. Where is an example? I did notice that in the past there was like when a lot of the entry queue proxy code was moved from the entry the entry like Win kernel implementation to the KPNG code base. There were some cases where instead of using like the core v1 API types, things needed to move to the protobuf, like the KPNG gRPC APIs, and there were some slight differences, and some of those were just completely commented out instead of
that was me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was a make it build thing, and some of the like the structures between how the core v1 types and the gRPC representations changed a little bit. There's probably going to be a lot of small things to like wins. Like, so here, this was the code from, this was, I'm guessing, the code from KPMG that was commented out, and then this is what it turned into. And so just the structure changed a little bit. There was here's a good example. So yeah, some of the flags like service external traffic to local, before it was external traffic policy equals service external traffic policy type local. So just figuring out what those mappings are.
Yeah, we'll have to map those over. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Mhm.
You're looking at, how did you manage to get the diff in there? Oh, you added.
Yeah,
this-
I addressed some of that in a PR, so I just pulled up the PR that
Okay, cool.
that's already been checked in.
Awesome.
So I think I got it to the point where it was able to create the load balancers that were this way, but I think that there's definitely some issues in the delete paths. Probably the same thing. But we can, I
All
think,
right, cool.
after there's a test signal, we'll kind of iterate.
Okay, cool. So for us, we set up, I didn't know you were so far on the CI side, because so what I did is I was like, well, we set up a shared kind of development environment, and we were gonna partially like maybe add that as a GitHub action that was like constantly running and reloading and running from master. But it sounds like you're making fast progress on the CI side. So you think you're going to be able to finish having a CI? There's a lot to do for a test in for a CI job, right? Like, or is it that you just have to change, you're just going to add that host process container and you think the rest of it will just work?
Yeah, so what I started last week is I added another template into the CapZ repository that makes it so that we don't deploy kubeproxy as a customer resource set, and then we'll pretty much just install the RBAC file, like the deployment file, and this deployment set as a customer resource set if you're using that specific template. And that'll be pretty much the same configuration as the other upstream ED tests that we have in CapZ.
Okay, cool.
I need to just finish that up.
Oh, great. Okay. All right, cool. If you get busy and you feel like you want somebody else to like maintain that or whatever, and you just write up instructions, maybe that might be something we can give to someone else. It sounds like that's one of those things where if you know the 6 different files that you have to edit and who to ping on the GitHub issue, then it's not a hard thing to do, right? So
yeah,
yeah, cool.
One other thing that I'll call out, and I was chatting with Amim about this too. I think there's an issue about this is I think there's a couple different ways to kind of bootstrap this. And I think I might have just talked about it in Slack too.
Yeah.
But basically, like, we need to, when KPMG starts up, it needs to talk to the API server to get all of the routes and everything that it needs to program. So one issue that I was running into was there's a service IP address for the API server, but that is not reachable by the Windows nodes until you start running KPMG to do that programming. So there's a couple options of what we could do, and what we were doing for like the entry kube proxy is just passing it a kube proxy or a kube config file with a public or with an external IP address or DNS name in there. I got it working by overriding these environment variables. These are the environment variables that in-cluster config uses when it tries to build the REST client. So these automatically get populated with the pod, no, these ones are what I'm talking about. So these get populated in the environment of all of the pods or containers and pods so that they can talk to the API server. But what I did here, instead of trying to wire up a kube config file, was I just overrode it with what one of the default IP addresses for the master node in a CapZ cluster.
Yeah. Okay.
So
we're going to have to give it a kube config because that's not how you're going to want to run it. Okay.
So there's a couple of rough edges here.
Is that normally what I guess that's normally, yeah, that's normally the only thing you can do, because you can't access it on localhost because you're not going to have an API server on localhost
Yeah,
in Windows. So normally we always have to give it a kube config, I guess.
I think eventually, and I think James, you have a lot more probably background in this, but I think eventually we want kubeadm to create that file for us. I don't know exactly how this works on the Linux nodes, but in the cluster API deployments that we have, there's usually an init container that builds that from something, or you have to put it in as a config map or a secret in the cluster. So and that's definitely different than how it gets bootstrapped on the Linux side of things. So I
Yeah,
think
for our Cappy ones, I think we give God permissions to the kubelet Cappy thing, and then we use that, and we reuse that one.
So it's reusing the same kube config as the node join.
I think that's how I did it. I think Amin changed that eventually, but that's originally how I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so kubeadm creates a config RBAC role and then wires up a kube config that points to the RBAC role for kubeproxy. And so we could just reuse that probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would be, but kubeadm currently deploys the Linux version of kubeproxy, and it would be nice as a usability perspective for customers to get that same experience in Windows without having to do that extra step. But I think once we have this all stable, then we can approach that with the kubeadm folks.
Yeah, for now it's enough to just change the RBAC rules though, right?
Yeah, so I mean, we could essentially, if we could assume that there's like the kubeadm RBAC provider, and we could even create the config. So the way they do is they have a
kubeadm RBAC provider. I didn't even know.
Well, there's they create an RBAC for kubeproxy, or somebody does. I don't know exactly who does, but that's what they use under the hood is that account, the service account that is kubeproxy. And so we could either assume it's there or create one that's very similar to ourselves, and then the kube config that they use just redirects towards the in cluster config.
But there's a thing called kubeadm RBAC provider.
No.
That's not a thing. It's not.
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
No.
All right.
Like they use the RBAC that is set up for kubeproxy. Like there's a service count.
Yeah, they hijack that. Yeah. Okay, got it. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah. Okay. Oh man, I thought I was gonna have to learn about another provider, and I don't even know.
No, sorry, that's the wrong words.
We have an IPAM provider now. I don't know what the hell that does. Okay, all right.
It looks like somebody added this OCI.
Yeah, I just add this as a note just to give folks a heads up that this community member has been working on this for a while, and
Awesome.
just we merged this last week into Image Builder. So there's another provider out there with Windows support.
Oh wow, OCI. Okay.
I didn't even know OCI had one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
awesome. Does anybody else have anything you want to discuss? Not, I think we're almost.
Mark, I just want to quickly go over the fix that we had for the pause containers perf bug.
Oh,
and see
sure.
if anyone has any concerns. So a quick overview with the pause containers on Windows, we were saying.
I do need to drop in a minute. I'll give either James or Jay the host so that I can go to the node to discuss that other.
Yeah, same for me. I'm gonna have to drop.
Okay. So we noticed a perf impact on the pause containers in Windows, and this is because we were overriding the entry point to a ping.exe immaterial of what container image was being used. And the proposed fix that we have for for this one is to basically override the entry point with ping.exe only if the base image is nanoserver and server code, and it comes with a default entry point, which is C Windows System 32 and command.exe. So I think this is just to help folks who are still relying on nanoserver or server code for the POS containers, which I highly doubt they are. And this is just an attempt to not break those folks. But if someone tries to build a POS container, a POS image from either nanoserver and server code, and then rewrite the entry point to maybe just say cmd.exe, then we will not be overwriting with ping, and they could break. So just wanted to see if any of you had any concerns or any thoughts on this.
Do you have the link to that issue where, or maybe the PR as well? We can just drop it in here.
Yes, I do. Let me just quickly. Get it. So,
Great. Oh, doesn't look like that's the right one, but you.
I think you have to add the Microsoft. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so it merged. Okay, great.
I've just merged this into the main branch and I haven't backported to 1.6. I think the main concern is we didn't want to break anyone in a minor release. So
Cool. Yeah, so essentially this will enable actually running the POS binary that we build in Kubernetes, whereas it was being overridden previously.
One question.
It was being overridden by what? Sorry, go ahead, Claudio.
So basically this checks if the first argument of the process itself is the full path for cmd.exe. Is it always the full path?
so if nanoserver and server core images are used as is without any like changes to it, that's the default entry point that comes with the image.
So who was overriding it, James? Or Cortana? What was the?
So I think this change was made before POS images were introduced, and for the
okay.
POS containers, we wanted a way to keep it alive. So I think the decision back then was to use ping.exe because it's available in nanoservers. Basically all
Gotcha.
Windows
Okay,
images.
I understand. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, it was in HCS shim when a container was started.
Okay. So
And it was, I think it was causing network instability. Is that right, Katrina?
Right.
Yeah, so it should be a net positive for us.
do you think, is there network instability, like as in what is it? You think that might have been one of the reasons why we had all the problems with UDP?
It was, what was it, a 5-second delay or something occasionally? Like every would be a 5-second delay in the network starting up. I think something along those lines.
Oh, that may we mean maybe we can look at whatever the weird optimizations we did in the Windows network policy tests now, because we put a lot of hacks in there to make them go slower on purpose. Okay, cool. This is great news.
That's all I had.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks. Pramita and David joined. They're two new folks that are getting involved, and I'm kind of working a little in the background with them. They're doing David's got, I think, pretty good. David, do you have any updates on the
Yeah, so I was doing the deployment with the SIG-Windows dev tools, and it was failing out. Reached out to a meme. He was able to help guide me through the error, stating that it was a container D issue. So I was able to get a pull request in and updated main with updating the container D. So changed the logic on the install there. So now it installs good. So the next step is automating the host process for the container D through the Calico stuff there. And basically I've got everything up except for one bit of it where the Windows proxies, the who am I that are automatically deployed at the beginning aren't able to go into a ready state. But everything else has. So I'm stepping through that and trying to code that up. It's kind of where I'm at now. So, but yeah, got 2 pull requests up so far. One was that Windows dual boot, and then that Calico, the container D update for the control plane machine. And now the next thing is getting the host process itself situated for Calico.
Cool. Thanks, David. All right.
Yeah.
Great. I'm working with Damon in the mornings he's getting up and running with this stuff too. So that's good. And then Pramita, you had some QEMU stuff, right? Like it
Yep.
was working almost.
So basically the image that I had for ARM-based architecture, that is working with rsync. Rsync, that's something which you suggested. I'm trying to use the boxes that we already have, like the Ubuntu 2004, which is there in the code itself. So that is failing for me. I'm not able to do SSH to the existing boxes. So that is something I'm debugging. But yeah, rsync worked with my version of box that I had, like the image that is ARM based. That is working. But yeah, the images that you had in your the code, the existing code, that is something failing for me, that I cannot do SSH
Oh,
to
so the
those.
Windows images that are not ARM-based are failing.
Yes.
Oh shit.
So ARM-based. So basically,
didn't care about ARM.
yeah, but those, so I'm not able to do SSH to those. Like when you'll do vagrant status, it is up, like it's there, but SSH is not working.
So is it when you do SSH? Is it because
it just holds
timing
like,
out?
Yeah, timing out. Yes.
Oh God. So okay. So the network is not reachable.
And
you can't SSH into the Linux VM or the Windows VM.
Yes, either of them. Yes, both.
Oh God, I wonder if we have to RDP into them or something. Okay. All right, we can maybe look at that together and see what the issue is. I hope it's not a situation where QEMU on your Mac doesn't work.
Okay, need to check that.
Like, what if it's a situation where QEMU on your Mac can make VMs, but you're not able to be connected to those VMs through the network? Like they're on some other separate network.
Yeah, could be something that
I
we
hope
are
it's not
missing.
that. But if it is that, maybe there's some other thing. Like, can you manually click on? Does QEMU give you like a UI or something?
UI, no. So there's a tool, UTM, that QEM. So basically, the base of it is QEM only, but it's a GUI based with UTM, which actually gives you a GUI based for creating the VMs and everything. There, I was able to do SSH and everything, but with the commands, like the vagrant up --- provider.
Can Vagrant provision? Like, what happened? Is Vagrant able to provision anything? Is Vagrant able to get in there?
No. That's what I'm saying. So the
Vagrant provision fails, and in addition, of course, you can't SSH into it.
SSH to yes.
And the IPs, if you try to ping those IPs, they're essentially unreachable.
Unreachable, yes. So IPs come from the YAML file that we have, right? I did not change those.
One thing you could possibly do is you could see what happens if you don't hard code those IPs. Because we hard code those IPs assuming that VirtualBox private networks are working. But maybe QEMU Vagrant doesn't support private network.
Okay.
So maybe if you get rid of the private network, maybe if you get rid of the private network, you'll at least be able to get into the VMs, and then we'll have a new problem, which is that now we don't know what to hard code all the static IPs to.
Okay.
So you could possibly
Yeah, I
comment
can
out
try
private
that.
network and see if that works better. Okay, cool.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna drop. Thanks, David and Pramita, for coming and helping us out with this stuff.
Hey, there's an issue, by the way, in Vagrant libvirt with some Kimu stuff here that's talking about SSH into these boxes, and they claim they got it working. I'll just, I'm on my phone right now, but I'm gonna post it in SIG-Windows.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
I'll tag you, Jake.
Thank you.
I didn't notice who else. But there you go. That might help. I'm not sure.
Luther strikes back.
No, I
Luther's
don't.
back.
Never ever. Never ever.
The return of Luther Monson. Okay. All right,
There you go.
thanks. All right. Pramita, let me know if you want to like look at this together at sometime tomorrow or something. I'll be up early.
Okay, sure. Yeah,
Okay.
I'll ping you.
All right, see ya. Bye, everybody.
See ya.
Yeah.